Okay, so now that I've had a day, not even really a day, an evening to digest the Bulls' most recent signings, as the videos I put out yesterday were really my instant reaction to said signings minutes after the news was announced, and to an extent, my sentiment about what I expressed yesterday has changed slightly, but honestly, I'm still not the biggest fan of these signings. There are certain aspects that I do like about them, which I'll cover in more detail, but I do feel like there were better options for the Bulls, and realistic options, I might add. But either way, I'll be covering all of that in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Guys, before I get into the content, I just want to give a huge shout out to all of you guys for getting the channel to 13,000 subscribers. I know I've said this before, but I am always humbled at the support that you guys have shown on this channel since starting it last season. I love all of you guys in the community that we've been able to grow together, and hopefully we can keep it going, especially now that the Bulls are actually going to be an exciting team to watch this season. So just wanted to thank you guys, and again, a huge shout out to Bulls Nation. You guys really are the best. But anyway, let's get back into what you guys came here for. Let's get back into the topic. So you really can't make this stuff up, guys. Like, this is the second time that this has happened in the past couple of weeks, the first of which I uploaded a video on Lauri Markkanen and what I thought would ultimately happen with him after we had been waiting for nearly a month post-free agency opening on what was going to be his fate. And then just 1 hour after uploading the video, we get the Woj bomb, or maybe it was the Shams bomb at the time, that Markkanen was moved in a sign and trade to the Cavs. Then yesterday morning, I come out with a video titled, "So what are the Bulls going to do to fill out their roster?" Because we had kind of been in limbo ever since moving on from Markkanen, and guys like Millsap and LaMarcus Aldridge, DeAndre Jordan had all gone off to other teams. These were various players that were thought to be linked to the Bulls anyway. And just 2 hours after posting that video, we get the announcement that the Bulls have signed Stanley Johnson, filling one of the 2 remaining roster spots. And then just an hour or so after that, we get the news. We get the other Johnson signing. We get the announcement that the Bulls have agreed to a 2-year deal with Alize Johnson. So just like that, the Bulls roster has been filled, which I guess is a good thing. We now know who we're going to be working with about 3 weeks ahead of training camp. Granted, things can be subject to change, especially if any trades are made, which I wouldn't be shocked if there were any. But as of right now, this is the Bulls 15-man roster with these final 2 signings. Now, let me start with the positives of these signings before I go into the negatives, so I don't just sound like a big-time pessimist. And let me also just say, since I know some people in the comments were saying, Bulls fans need to settle down, the Bulls had an incredible offseason, and you're not just going to be able to get whatever you want, and these signings should really be viewed more as depth signings to give you small minutes off the bench. And that's really even if they're in the rotation. And look, I get that. Obviously, the front office knows way more about the game and business side of basketball than we ever will. And obviously, they were working with limited options to finalize the roster, so I acknowledge this. It's not something we should be too concerned about, because really these guys aren't going to be getting a ton of playing time either way. But all that being said, the pros of these signings, I think the biggest thing for me is that for both of these guys, Stanley and Alize, they have both something to prove, which, to be honest, kind of goes along with the theme of the rest of this roster. You have Stanley Johnson, who was a very highly recruited player coming out of high school, ranked 3rd in the nation as a senior, was a lottery pick, selected 8th overall, and has just struggled to make any kind of traction in the NBA, living up to that hype and potential he had coming out of high school. The Pistons, the team that drafted him, gave up on him, and he had a very underwhelming stint in Toronto, even though, yes, I realize he probably had one of the best games of his career against the Bulls last year. But for Stanley Johnson, he's 25, so it's not like he's old and washed. He's been given up by a lot of teams since entering the NBA, which rightfully so. He's incredibly inefficient on offense. So in a new environment, a winning environment, which he's never been a part of throughout his career, could be just the right boost to revitalize his career, and in a role where he isn't expected to do much on offense, but just focus on his hustle defense. As for Alize, I mean, I said it yesterday, the guy has only played in 49 games for his NBA career. He was a second round pick, 50th overall, didn't really do too much or get a ton of playing time in his first 2 seasons with the Pacers, gets waived by the Pacers, signs a few 10-day contracts. Then the Nets pick him up for the rest of the year after playing well for them, averaging 5 and 5 and on 10 minutes per game over 18 games. Then he gets released by the Nets. So again, another guy who has a big chip on his shoulder is ready to prove that he belongs in this league. Another young player, only 25. And this could be a big opportunity for him given the fact that the Bulls are pretty thin at the power forward position behind Patrick Williams, so he's likely going to get some decent run. Kevin Durant had a lot of great things to say about him, which is great to hear from his former teammate. What I also like about these two players is they play hard. They hustle, especially on the defensive end. They have a strong work ethic, even though they may not be the most gifted players. But for the Bulls, I mean, we need guys like that. That was one of our biggest issues last season. You had a lot of talented, offensive-minded guys, but when it came to hustle players, hard workers on defense, we really didn't have that many outside of Thaddeus Young, who the Bulls, of course, moved in a sign and trade for DeRozan. So despite these guys maybe not being as talented as other guys on the roster, you're going to need them, guys like that who are going to be dogs on the court on defense and fighting for every play. So these are aspects of the signings that I like. The other thing is you never really know if Alize is going to be that type of player who will break out, just a late bloomer in his basketball development. And maybe that's why 8K was so high on him, giving him a 2-year deal. I don't know if I can say the same thing for Stanley Johnson because we kind of already know what he is at this point in his career, but Alize has only played in the league for a limited period of time, so you never know how he's going to develop further heading into his prime years. Now, as for the reasons I don't like these signings, I mean, I think the main thing is the Bulls are still going to be playing small, which, yes, I get it. The league is turning more and more towards small ball play, positionless basketball, where the focus is on three-point shooting. But if this is it, the Bulls are going to struggle against teams with a lot of front court depth because really you only have 3 quote-unquote big men. You have Vucevic, you have Tony Bradley, and Marko Simonovic. One who has only played limited time in the NBA in a reserve role and limited minutes, and the other who hasn't even played a single game in the NBA coming into his rookie year. That's a bit concerning if you're the Bulls, and my hope was that they would have at least filled out one of those 2 final roster spots with a legit big man power forward, someone that was at least 6'9" to give you more size down low. Signing Stanley Johnson, I know he can play the power forward, but he's better suited at a 3 playing off the wing. He's only 6'6", and then Alize, I mean, he is actually a power forward, but he's also only 6'7". Patrick Williams, who will be the Bulls' starting power forward, is also only 6'7". So this small lineup in terms of height, again, likely not a huge issue because you have teams like the Warriors who played small ball for years and were very successful without much front court depth. But that's one downside in my view. The other thing is, in my opinion, there were better options. I said it before, as much as I don't like the guy and he's had a serious history of injuries in the league, but DeMarcus Cousins, getting him on a minimum deal, which by the way would have been less than what the Bulls offered Alize. Is Cousins a risk? Sure, mainly because he's injury prone, he's older, but he's a big body that can give you some more size and depth in the front court, and he's also an energy guy, something the Bulls need. I'll say it again, the other option I was really hoping for what the Bulls would do would be trading that first round pick that they got in the Lowry marketing deal in exchange for a player like Marvin Bagley, a young player who doesn't really fit that roster that he's on, isn't really happy with his role, and if you can get a former number 2 overall pick and a highly touted prospect coming out of college for a first round pick, a lottery protected first round pick at that, that's a steal in my book. Obviously, we don't know all the ins and outs of the front office dealings. I'm sure there were aspects of moving that pick that maybe wouldn't be practical, and it's also possible the front office is holding on to that pick until the Lonzo Ball investigation is over, and who knows, maybe they're also looking to package that pick and Kobe White and maybe even another piece for an even bigger star in the near future. But in short, I do think that there were better options than Stanley and Alize Johnson. I mean, even Jarrett Vanderbilt or a guy like Patrick Patterson would have made more sense to me. The other reason I'm not as high on this signing is the amount that the Bulls agreed to with Alize Johnson. I mean, you're probably thinking 2 years, $3.6 million. Dude, that's nothing compared to what some of these other guys are getting. Well, yes, that's a lot for a guy who hasn't even played 50 games in the NBA, though. A guy who has been working on 10-day contracts, and then you offer him a full 2-year deal. I think a 1-year guaranteed deal would have made more sense to give you flexibility going into next offseason, especially for a guy that still has a lot to prove. And then finally, not that we need so much offense with what we already have, but neither of these guys are good offensive players, especially Stanley Johnson. Like I said, I like that they're hustle players on defense, and I like that they have strong work ethic, but Alize, not a good three-point shooter, not much of a shooter in general. He can score at the basket pretty well, and he's actually a pretty efficient player when he's moving in transition. Stanley, I mean, he's one of the more inefficient players in the league with a career PER of just 8.7. Like, that's pretty bad for a guy that has been in the league for 6 years and has played 371 games. He did improve his three-point shooting slightly this past season to 32%, but a career average of less than 30% from three is pretty bad in today's NBA. And he's also not efficient from the field overall, shooting just 37% for his career. He only averaged 4.4 points per game last season and 2.5 rebounds. And it's not like he was playing 5 minutes per game with those numbers. No, he averaged 16.5 minutes per game with the Raptors last season. But again, a good defender, one of the better pickpocketers in the league if you look at his steals per 36 minutes. Anyway, I think that's enough nitpicking of these signings. I mean, at the end of the day, I trust in this front office. You know, these are, again, just the 14th and 15th players on the roster. They're likely not going to be getting a ton of playing time, although I do think Alize likely will be getting more runs since we don't have a ton of power forwards. I personally would have just preferred a different route to round out this roster, but I'm also not a GM, and we can't always get what we want. Let's just be happy with the huge additions we made to this roster, and just thank God that Garpax are no longer running things anymore. I want to know what you guys think, though. What do you think of the Johnson signings? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will catch you guys in the next one.